The previews for Greenskin and Golden might just keep coming. Today we've got some big shake-ups for the Custodes, with Martial Guitar being rewritten, and Custodes looking far less durable but far more deadly with their new Shield Host rules, plus a focus on the Orky Beast Snagger detachment with the Big Hunt, marking a target to be your prey and getting some massive damage boosts against that. Let's have a look at the new rules and what they bring for these upcoming codexes. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking big rules previews once more. Games Workshop has delivered us a fair bunch more stuff for the Adeptus Custodes and the Orks, so it's time to dig in through all the rules and see what we've got. This is a big week for Warhammer 40k, with both Orks and Custodes going up for pre-order this weekend. The new codexes, Combat Patrols and Battle Force box sets all go live on the 13th of April and full sale on the 27th of April, presumably digital points coming sometime in between. We had a few teasers at their product preview at the weekend, and then a couple of rules articles over the week so far. Today though, we've got a bunch more rules showcased, this time locked to a battle report on Warhammer Plus. The rules that got shown off were maybe a little bit scattergun depending on what stratagems the players chose to use, but basically it was a fight between Beast Snagger Orks led by Ghazghkull Thraka. They were showcasing their Big Hunt detachment, the Beast Snagger one where you mark some prey, and then a lot of core rules and stratagems revolve around that, and also showed us just a couple of hints to a Squigosaur and Big Mek change, plus confirming that the core Waaagh rule is unchanged. For the Custodes, it was a shield host commanded by Trajan Valoris. This one in theory is the index detachment, though it looks like it's been very heavily edited. It's basically going to be a completely different detachment, with the core rule swapping from a defensive one to a damage one. And as mentioned, Martial Guitar has changed, and it looks like the Castellan Axes for the Terminators have as well. Overall, it's looking like a fairly exciting week for 40k releases with the Combat Patrols, Codexes and Battle Forces, and as always, if you were looking to pre-order any of it, then feel free to check out the links in the video description for some money off. There's Element Games in the UK, Gap Games in Australia, Wargame Portal in the USA, and Fenris Workshop in Canada, all of which should be getting some good stocks of the new Orky and Custodes goodness, and can certainly save you some good money compared with buying directly through Games Workshop. Anything bought through those in the links in the video description does go to help support the channel a little bit as well. Let's jump in and start with the Orc stuff. First up, they did confirm that the Waaagh rule is unchanged. I think it's nice enough to have that confirmation, seeing as it's the only real rule that's absolutely shared by every single one of the greenskins, and good to get that confirmed, seeing as the Custodes core rule did change. Still looks good, pretty much a spectacular damage boost to Orcs on the turn that it's called. Units get to advance and charge, which is big. You get +1 to strength and attack characteristics for melee weapons equipped by your army. That's going to add up to significant more damage in whatever circumstances. If you get a +1 to wound due to that strength boost, then even better. And also everything is just hyper resilient with a 5+ invulnerable save as well. Really nice for lower save Orc units in particular. Overall, I feel like it's pretty reasonable to keep that the same. It does still have some downsides in that the opponent will see it coming, given that you call it at the start of the battle round if the Orc player happens to go second. Could basically mean the opponent can sort of set up to receive the charge and everything. Plus, it doesn't really do a fat lot for shooty Orc units besides the invulnerable save. It doesn't look like there's any sort of aversion to the Waaagh or Speed Waaagh thing that they had going on in 9th. Overall, it looks like melee is still going to be at the absolute heart of the Orc army, which I don't really think is too bad a thing given the faction, really. Onto the detachment though, and the Beast Snagger one is called Da Big Hunt. We saw its name earlier in the week, and it did seem very likely to be Beast Snagger focused, and it looks like its core rule is a damage boost rule, almost like Orkiotha Moment. In your command phase, you get to select one monster vehicle or warlord unit from your opponent's army. That unit is considered to be your prey, and you get to reroll charge rolls with Beast Snagger units against that, and any Beast Snagger models make an attack against it, then they get to improve the AP of the attack by 1, and that does seem to account for both range and melee attacks, although most Beast Snagger units are far more scary in melee. In addition, for the choice of targets thing, if the warlord of the enemy army is not on the board at that point, and it's not within a transport vehicle, then you can select one character unit instead of that, which I think is quite nice and flexible really. I think it's good that it's not just solely good for killing monsters and vehicles, even if that is the Beast Snagger's whole thing. It just means they'd be essentially fighting without a detachment rule at all if they happen to be playing against an infantry army. It's still definitely a rule that's going to be far more effective though if the opponent does have monsters or vehicles, if they have their nominated warlords to be more of a support character who's hiding safe at the back, then it's just not going to be quite as meaningful as if they give their warlord to something really big, fighty and threatening. I guess certain armies have to have certain models as their warlord, say for example the Demon Primarchs for the Deity Chaos Legions or Abaddon the Despoiler, and some armies might not have all that much choice. For the actual boost though, the charge thing seems nice enough. Reroll charges will probably occasionally save you some command point rerolls, and the extra AP I think is particularly good. That's just what the Beast Snaggers want against really big tough vehicles with high saves like 2+ armor. They often at least stack a fair few wounds on most targets given the anti-keyword rules that they have going round, plus other buffs against monsters and vehicles, but they can be let down by having really quite high saves against those attacks, so this will be really nice for say if Mozrog Scragbad or similar gets into combat with a great big enemy tank. It's going to be far more potent if you mark that as your prey. At base I say that this one seems interesting, but not super strong. I certainly say it's far less powerful as a core rule than just sustained hits in melee against everything. This one only applies to certain units out of your army, even if I'm sure you'll be going heavy on the Beast Snaggers in this particular detachment, and only affects one target in the enemy army, which might not necessarily be a particularly optimal one in some games where they're taking loads of infantry. Maybe not the most helpful for it being really quite strong in certain games, and very weak indeed in others perhaps. Otherwise, beyond the core rule, we've got one enhancement preview and 2 stratagems. The enhancement is called Proper Killy, which I think is nice enough. Again, it's Beast Snaggers only. I'd honestly expect basically everything in this detachment just to be Beast Snagger only. It's a nice simple one, just add +1 to the damage characteristic of your melee weapons equipped by the bearer, so a damage 3 Beast Boss, and I guess a damage 3/4 Beast Boss on Squigosaur. If that's cheap enough, it could be basically auto-include on those characters, particularly for the Beast Boss on foot. That's going up to a massive damage 3 on those attacks against the prey it perhaps most wants to be tangling with, which is just great. Damage 2's damage 3 will be plus 50% damage boosts. It's pretty relevant for all the Terminators around in the game as well. It means the boss will be punching dead one Terminator per failed save, which again I think is really meaningful. Unless this one's costed really highly, and depending on what the other options are, I feel like this one could be very tempting. Otherwise, for stratagems, we've got a Squighog one called Unstoppable Momentum. This one it triggers on a Beast Snagger mounted unit, which essentially is just the Squighog boys, whereas we'll get onto it looks like the Squigosaur boss will be joining them. It's a 1 command point on the charge. Each model triggers a mortal wound on a roll of a 4+, and then you get an extra 3 additional d6 if you target your prey. The overall stratagem is capped out at 6 mortal wounds, so you're not going to be wiping out entire units of tough stuff like this. But still, that could be quite a lot of damage. Overall, I feel like this one is probably going to be worth it against the prey, presuming you don't have enough damage just to outright destroy them on the charge regardless of this. It does seem a bit mediocre on other things though. If you've got a 4 squig unit with a knob and then 3 Squighog boys, that's only going to average you 2 mortal wounds, which just doesn't really seem to be a good trade for 1 CP. The other showcase stratagem was Drag It Down. This one's a 1 command point 1 for sustained hits 1 on your melee weapons. Again, as you'd expect, it's locked to Beast Snaggers. Again, this one's kind of dependent on attacking your prey model to make it really good though. It triggers on a 5+ on the prey model rather than on a 6, giving you a critical hit on that. That could be kind of nice for any other way that you might have to get lethal hits in melee. Potentially with Ghazghkull Thracker in the Waaagh, or Kilrig's Aura if you get lucky. Again, this one feels like it's broadly going to be worth it against the prey quite regularly, an extra 50% damage increase for those critical hits if you were hitting on a 3+ before, but would only be amounting to a 25% boost on most units. Occasionally could be worth it, but that's not going to be an absolute staple. Again, it maybe does feel just a little bit dodgy that both of these are dependent on attacking the prey unit to be good, as mentioned, in a take-all-comers game you might be playing against an army where you just don't have any good prey. I guess we'll have to wait and see for the rest of the detachment. At the moment though, it really looks like it's going to be shaping up to be a detachment that's going to be quite good against some monster and vehicle heavy armies, and kind of bad against some forces that just want to be all infantry. Otherwise, we've got just a couple of little teasers for the other orc things. The Big Mek only just got one more confirmed rule in that he could lead knobs as well. I'd guess unless they shake things up at all, he'll probably be able to lead the same things as the old custom force field Mek could. That's be looters, burners, knobs, boys, and tank busters, unless they decide to change things round at all. It was maybe a bit disappointing not to see a little bit more of him in the battle report. He basically sat in the corner with a unit of knobs all game long for some reason, and didn't really take any part in the main battle. Otherwise, we have had the previous previews for him in that tractor blaster being spectacularly inaccurate, but really devastating if it hits a fly unit. Anti-fly plus devastating wounds means you're likely punching through d6+1 wounds that the enemy can't do anything about. though that is dependent on hitting first of course. Otherwise, the shock booster he has allows you to reroll advanced rolls for the unit, which could be big in the Waaagh, and also teleport through any intervening enemy models or terrain. In any case, we'll be fun to see what his combat weapons do, and that custom Mega Blaster profile, whether it's just the standard one or something new. Otherwise, the last small change for the Orks appears to be to the Squigosaur boss. Looks like Squighog boys are really being quite reimagined. Previously, you just got the regular boys, and then you could have them joined by the Knob if you wanted. Now it looks like the Knob gets included in the unit just as standard, so your base unit size is likely to be 4 boys including the Knob now. And now it looks like the character attachment for the unit will be the Beast Boss on the Squigosaur, which I'm kinda surprised wasn't the way that they did it the first time round really. My guess is they'll change his stats around a bit to kind of mirror Gazgul in a way. His stat line isn't quite on the same sort of level as things like Primarch's due to him being part of a unit. I'd guess that this guy might get a decrease in wounds and toughness as a result, as he's more of a leader character now, as opposed to just having to be an outright tank in his own right. I guess that could make for a pretty terrifying unit of Squighog boys though. That would mean that at least he's got some meat shields to move up the board to shield him from enemy shooting. It feels like this will be a different way to play him though, and that will probably extend to Mozrog Scragbad as well. So I guess these guys will be moving more to a unit leader sort of role as opposed to big tanky thing that the opponent struggles to kill even with direct anti-tank fire. It seems that that's it for the Orcs for now, so let's move on to the Custodes, who did take some really quite big changes to some of their core rules here. First up, we've got Martial Qatar being changed. This one I'd say is maybe side graded. The upgrade that it got is that each individual unit can now pick which stance you want. You don't have to just decide all over for the entire army, whether you're going to Katarai or Rendax. So it means that different units attacking different things can choose the one that makes sense for them, usually lethal hits against big tough stuff, or sustained hits against anything they're wounding on a 3+. However, it did take one downside as well. It's lost the ability to activate a -1 to hit, and that is kind of a blow for the enemy fight phase. It means that you can't just activate durability mode when the enemy is going to be attacking with everything first, and has a good chance to wipe out your squad before you fight. Overall, I'd perhaps argue that the loss of that option is perhaps amounting to a slight downgrade overall, though I feel like there's not really that much in it. Being able to choose lethal hits on the squad that's fighting a big monster and sustained on the squad that's fighting a big horde, that's going to be a pretty big boost. I'm sure most people know the massive lethal hits and sustained now, but for Custodes hitting on a 2+, lethal hits is usually a 40% damage increase against things that you'd wound on a 5, even better on a 6. And then beyond that, it's largely going to be better to go sustained. It's even against anything that you wound on a 4, and then better against everything that you wound on a 3 or 2. With exploding 6s to hit, it just means that you get a 20% boost against everything. Before the changes to the shield host, I did notice there was potentially one interesting change to Castellan Axes. Custodian Wardens, Terminators, and some of the characters get to choose between a Guardian Spear or a Castellan Axe, and unless the battle report made an error and rolled to hit them on a 2+, it appears that they have had a weapon skill upgrade. They previously were hitting on a 3+, at Strength 9, AP 1, and Damage 3, and that basically just had them as flat inferior to Guardian Spears, which hit with 5 attacks on a 2, at Strength 7, AP 2, and Damage 2. In general, for Custodes players, it was just seen as the extra strength and the extra damage just really wasn't worth it versus the AP attacks and weapon skill. Even against ideal targets for the axes, it was kind of a side grade at best. I might take a look at some of the maths of this in a little bit if it is confirmed to be the case and not just a mistake. My instincts will be that it's still probably going to be better to have most of a unit take Guardian Spears due to that low AP, but it's nice to see the axes won't just be a flat inferior choice. There will be some targets that they're meaningfully better against now. Perhaps the other most major change to the Adeptus Custodes was the Shield Host core rule. This one was one that I wasn't really expecting. In the index, their Shield Host rule is a 4+ save against mortal wounds that was extended to devastating wounds in an FAQ after devastating wounds themselves were changed to no longer be mortals. Now though, things really seem to have flipped around. I guess we saw that they're getting the 5+ save against mortal wounds and psychic attacks if they coordinate with Sisters of Silence in the Talons of the Emperor, and instead the Shield Host appears to be a damage dealing rule now, almost like the Custodes version of calling the Waaagh. One big army-wide close combat boost on the turn of your choosing. Like the Orcs Waaagh, you have to call this at the start of a battle round, which does have the downside that your opponent would see it coming and have to prepare for a turn of big Custodes melee, maybe trying to backpedal from certain units or absolutely make sure that things are destroyed if they don't want to take big damage. The buff that you get is two-part. First up, you get critical hits on a 5+ for the martial Qatar units, so that'll be triggering those sustained hits and the lethal hits that bit better. For sustained hits, compared with what you'd have normally, it's an extra plus 16% damage increase, so not enormous there. For the lethal hits, attacking something with a 5+ save, compared with what you'd have already with that lethal hits rule, it's an extra plus 20% damage increase, a bit more meaningful against those targets. That bit's only part of the story though, as you also get better AP in melee by 1 for that round. That's to make your Guardian Spears or AP3 or Castellan Axes AP2, which is very meaningful for them. If you combine the two rules against armies that actually care about that degraded save, ones with good saves like Space Marines or other things that already have a good save that isn't just pushed down to an invulnerable save, that's going to be really quite meaningful. If that pip of AP does make the difference, it could easily amount to something like a 50% damage boost or more. Overall, I feel like it's interesting, maybe a little bit limited in that it only happens on one round and then you're done. I guess you'd likely want to trigger it either battle round 2 or battle round 3 when your forces are maximally engaged but not too late to make a big swing in the game. This definitely doesn't feel like a direct upgrade for the Custodians though. They're going to be a lot easier to kill against mortal wounds and devastating wounds in this detachment now. I don't know if that rule will just be completely gone, moved to the Talons of the Emperor in its side-graded way, or the Auric Champions might get it. But particularly between this and the core rule, it feels like Custodians just flipped from being a highly defensive force with lots of special rules to one that's not really quite as hard to destroy, but is going to be even more fearsome in close combat than they were previously. Otherwise, for supporting rules for the shield host, we saw a captain enhancement. This one gives you +1 strength and damage to your bearer's melee weapons. I feel like if you're going for this one, as funny as the strength 10 damage for Castellan Axe would be, the Guardian Spear does seem more tempting. Strength 8, AP2 and damage 3 is just a very nice profile, great for an extra punch against tough stuff like vehicles, and will be killing Terminators in one attack each. Like the Orc one, going from damage 2 to damage 3 on a powerful unit leader is big, and provided this one doesn't cost excessively, I feel like it'll be popular. Otherwise, looks like a couple of the stratagems from the detachment have changed. There's a new one called Multipotentiality. That one allows you to fall back, shoot and charge with a Custodes unit, which admittedly is really quite powerful. It means that if you're locked in a grinding combat, you could fall back, shoot something with a whole bunch of Guardian Spear attacks, and then charge in to maintain fights first. Could be quite a nice one for making sure your units just don't get bogged down in a combat they've got no interest in being in, and can go after the most important thing as well. Could be a nice one for any fast movers like the jet bikes or the Venatari Custodians as well, and could even be used to stop Caladius tanks getting locked up in close combat. Perhaps one of the biggest changes to the detachment looks like it's two unwavering sentinels though. This one previously was the Custodians fight's first one on objectives for 2 command points, and it made them just very hard to get to grips with and take off the midfield objective points. This one's been changed to a 1 command point -1 to hit for Custodians infantry on objectives, not Sisters of Silence. It's certainly not an awful stratagem, that is one thing that could be useful as a defensive buff, particularly given they can't take this option on the Martial Qatar anymore. But even with the high cost, that was an absolutely game-changing stratagem that meant that if you had 2 CP in the bag, certain enemy units just couldn't afford to charge your units. Even with having the -1 to hit option, I feel like this is probably going to lower Custodes' ability to defend objective points rather than raise it. Seems like Custodians are losing fight first on 2 different levels here, both for Trajan Valoris and also for the stratagem in the shield host at least, though there's nothing to say that it couldn't be elsewhere in the codex, maybe moved to Auric Champions or something. Finally for stratagems, it seems we've got confirmation of one unchanged one in Avenge the Fallen. This one seems to be the same as it was before, a Custodes unit that's taken casualties in the fight phase and is below its starting strength. You get +1 attack per model, and if your squad is below half strength, then it goes up to +2 attacks per model. Depending on what sort of squad it was and how many casualties you'd taken, that's going to amount to somewhere between 2 to 5 extra attacks for the unit. Some of them might be boosted attacks as well if you've got a character in the squad like Trajan or a Blade Champion. For 1 command point, that genuinely could be enough to be well worth using. An extra 4 Guardian Spear attacks could put a couple more Space Marines to the sword. I don't think it's absolutely standout in terms of raw damage dealt, but if you just need that little bit of extra power to tip the balance between a combat being a win and a loss, then this one's definitely helpful. I do quite like the way it makes the last custodian or two in a squad feel like they're just stepping up to the plate and can achieve great things. Finally, it did seem that they made an effort to give the new Shield captain a starring role in the battle report, unlike with what they did with the Big Mek. He was leading a big unit from the front, and they certainly showcased his abilities every time he came up. We do know that he's got that Pyrothite spear for the melter gun shot, making sure they got literally every single time that fired on camera, despite it basically just being a melter gun. Otherwise, looks like they confirmed that he gets 7 attacks with his Guardian spears, and the Shield captain rules haven't really changed too much, it would seem. They still get their 0 CP battle tactics stratagem that was used on command point rerolls in this one. I don't know if the detachment had any battle tactics stratagems, but we didn't see any showcased. And he still gets his once per game martial guitar rule, being able to use 2 stances rather than 1. Given the changes to that, though, it's been rewritten slightly. You just literally get both of the available stances in sustained and lethal hits, and you don't have that -1 to hit option anymore. Overall, I feel like it's kind of interesting times for the Custodes. I'm not sure that all of this is necessarily good news for them, given that their game plan usually tends to be to get to the midfield objectives and then just survive all attacks. They don't usually have the speed for being able to hit the enemy first so much, so arguably durability might be more important than damage. It does seem with most of these previews, though, they've really tried to just make them super lethal in close combat, though not really quite as defensible, taking away the -1 to hit from their core martial Qatar, and the shield host losing its defense against mortal wounds and devastating wounds in favor of more damage on one big turn. Losing the fights first in the shield host also looks like a blow, although obviously that could have gone to a different detachment. We'll have to wait and see. In any case, let me know what you think of the changes both to the Custodians and the Orks. What do you make of the Big Hunt detachment? I'd be interested to hear your takes on the changed Custodians core rules, plus the possible change to that Castellan Axe. In any case, we'll still be interesting to see what the other detachments have in store for the Custodians. Not sure if they're going to be doing yet more previews over the course of this week, but if they do, I'll certainly cover everything here on the channel and be aiming to make some full reviews of the Custodians and Orks Codexes over the weekend. As ever, if you were looking to pick up any of the new releases, anything bought through the links down in the video description does save you a bit versus Games Workshop and help support the channel when they go live on Saturday. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, and if you'd like to help support, then the channel has a Patreon page as well, which is the main reason I can keep on making videos like this each and every day. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. The next one will be for those Chaos Battle Forces. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.